2020. We'll follow the agenda as was tagged in the issue in the TSC repo. We'll start it with, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share? I guess if nobody else has any, I'll just add, thanks to everybody for a successful OpenJS World and Collaborator Summit. We had lots of good Node.js sessions as part of the Collaborator Summit and talks at the conference. So, thanks to everybody who participated. Moving on to issues that were tagged for the agenda then. So the first one is proposal, create a triage team to manage the backlog, 34054. This was created by Matt Wilson. I don't know if we have anybody on the call with context in terms of the discussions that were held.
As far as I know, this is just one that came out of Collaborator Summit. There was one of the sessions talking about how to deal with the backlog. And the idea of creating the team was one of the suggestions. I have not followed the actual GitHub thread, so I don't have a lot of context on where that's at right now. But in general, it's a good idea.
I think part of the context that I did hear was that, it was something that we'd worked on and looked at in the package maintenance team for Express, and it's proven to be successful there and was seen as like a path into becoming a collaborator. So the thought was maybe it's a good pattern to mirror here in the Node project as well.
Yeah, it's yes and no. So in terms of triaging those issues, a lot of it tends to just go back to asking, hey, has this been done yet? Has this been done yet? Has this been done yet? Right. So it in itself is not a great way to contribute as much as
I think it was for new issues. Like it was that, like, at least for Express, the part where people saw the benefit is that people can go back and say, oh, well, there's not enough information here. Can you fill in this or tag it with the right tags? The question is, does that actually apply in our context?
Yeah, I guess like one of the thoughts I have there, Michael, is like we have a bot that applies a lot of the appropriate tags.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, and perhaps this is something broader and maybe associated with the code owners, but it's like beyond what like the basic tag does or something that could be automated based on what files are touched in code owners. It seems to me like most people who would come in that would want to help with the triage role would be like lacking the context to do a more advanced triage, and that like, I could be naive about this, but it seems to me like you would almost need the context that should make you like the equivalent of a collaborator to be in the place where like you could be there. Like, and perhaps I'm totally wrong about that. And perhaps there's like ways that like it's somewhere that folks can come and help out that want to like support and volunteer and do work. But I guess I'm having a hard time finding like what work is there that could not be automated that doesn't require the context of a collaborator to be super productive.
I think the part of it is like, say for Express, it's not nearly as easy to become a collaborator as it is for Node. So that may make it different, right? Like by the time you've done enough triaging on the Node front, we're likely to make you a collaborator anyway. It's still maybe interesting. Yeah, I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other. I haven't thought it through, but that was sort of I think that's the one bit of context I'd heard, is that like it had been successful there. Maybe it would make sense here too I think it would be good to have some of the people who are actually in the discussion before we sort of close it out. So I'd say let's wait for full discussion until we have some of the TSC members that were there. Like I think Jarish was there, if not a few other people, right?
I guess like the one ask I would have moving forward that would make sense is perhaps like a practical example of someone or a situation where it would make sense to make someone a triager and not a full collaborator. And I think like one or two examples of that would help me just like kind of understand where this would be helpful and useful.
Yeah, I think
So, like,
I think that's a good question, because that could be the difference between our project and some other projects.
so like one example. Oh, sorry, Beth, was that you?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the difference with Express was they heavily rely on tags. So like needs more info or needs reproduction example or something like that. And for you to be able to add tags, you need to be in a team. And the triage team is successful there because it gives people kind of permission to help out with the triage by adding labels, but nothing extra.
Yeah, I guess like one thing that I could imagine off the bat, like where triage could help, would be like we could give everyone on the community committee triage role on the Node project. That's like one place where I could see this could actually help with stuff. And there have been like a few people over time who, even for their own reasons, are like not engaged enough or wanting or doing enough like work on the project to be a committer or have a commit bit. But it could be useful for them to manage issues. I just like find it really hard to think of a scenario where we would want to give someone like that level of access and not just give them a commitment. So I think maybe there would be a broader conversation about limiting commit access that may have to be tied with that. Because to the point you were saying, Michael, like we are actually rather, rather open with handing out commit bits.
Right. Yeah, so I've added that in the notes. I think that's a good, I guess. So Bethany, were you there in that session, or?
Yeah, I was there. I was listening. It did come from, I think the suggestion was between Wes, Todd from Express, and Garish and a couple of others, just saying how it had been really successful there. And someone raised that Node had an issue with our backlog being quite high in terms of numbers, and whether this would be maybe more of a way to get focus, like a group of people could join the triage team who were invested in keeping the issue backlog down, and maybe that would drive more closing of dormant issues or more keeping track of what's going on and trying to close them out. But yeah, I'm kind of torn. I'm not sure it'd be.
Yeah, the focus angle is an interesting one in terms of like if it's people who want to, like if it sort of fostered a group of people who would get together and work on that, that could be interesting as well. I'd suggest we wait for the full discussion for when we have Jarish, who was at the meeting and has been very active in the Express triage. And I noted down, Miles, your question. Does that make sense for this time?
Yeah, sounds reasonable. We seem to have more people involved.
Okay, so let's move to the next one, which is rename default branch from master domain or something similar. I don't know, Miles, is there anything new to talk about this week on that one?
I don't think there's anything big to bring up at this moment. I think like the general sentiment the last time I checked was that folks are open to it in general, but definitely don't want to be the people like paving the path here. There's been a bunch of other projects who have been working on it. So I think we were maybe waiting to see a little bit more from GitHub as far as like, especially things around like redirects and things
Right.
that like would make the transition a little bit more painful. Like there are examples of how we could use actions to fix some of this, but I think we were waiting for a broader timeline. So I think right now it's in wait and see. And then maybe if it's like a month from now and nothing has really changed, I can follow up internally and we could see, maybe kind of iterate on it. But I'd say maybe wait, like another couple of weeks to see if there's any signal from GitHub themselves.
Okay. That makes sense. And we should leave it on the agenda so that we don't forget, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. The next one is doc, no longer maintain CNA structure 33639. This one was added by Sam. There's quite a few approvals. I don't see any objections. The only question was kind of like, if we drop CNA status, is there any effect on HackerOne? I think the answer was no.
Yeah, there should be no
Go ahead.
effect on.
Go ahead.
I'm saying there should be no effect on HackerOne at all.
Okay. So I mean, I'm happy to have this land if the, you know, people who've been working in HackerOne and getting CVs are happy that that's worked okay.
Mateo is probably the one that we would need most. He's probably been the most active there.
Okay.
Recently.
He has approved this, the PR.
So yeah, then I would say I'm good with it.
Okay, so we just need to, I think, go back to HackerOne and say, okay, we'd like to no longer be a CNA. I'll volunteer to do that. And then we'll land this volunteered. Okay. I don't think this needs to stay on the agenda anymore, does it?
Probably not.
Okay. Okay. Let me just take a note here and then. Okay, so the next issue is Bootstrap. Include bootstrapped environment and built in snapshot. This is 32984.
This is the issue that you know, that was coming down between Joey and Anna. They're, you know, two competing views, approaches on addressing some stuff. It got deadlocked to the point where Anna got so frustrated she just said okay and stopped doing her stuff. Technically, Joey's PR probably could go forward and land, but the question was, I mean, we really needed to get some additional views of the discussion, some additional input on it, on which approach was best. I was tempted. I could have weighed in as kind of a third person, but given that Anna was doing that work at my request, as you know, uniform stuff, then that would have just made it a bit too one-sided. All right. So I did not want to get involved in that conversation. So again, technically, I think Joey's work proceed, but we really do need to have a couple more eyeballs on that, on the two approaches to kind of break some of the disagreement, the logic.
I think so. Understood. I think the challenge is, you know, a few people have looked at it, but it's very, very detailed, in depth. It's going to take many hours for somebody to get to the point where they can comment.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's why it's stuck. If there could be like a, you know, do you really need to know all of that to understand the main points of disagreement? Like, what's the concern of one versus the other, right? Like, I guess, you know, Joey's works, it could land. What's the downside of that just happening?
There are some differences. One of the key differences is that Anna's was including including user code in the snapshot. So her version would basically snapshot after the first entry point JavaScript ran. whereas Joey's snapshots just Node's environment and doesn't include any user code. That's one of the key differences. I would not feel comfortable going through and summarizing all the differences, because I don't know if I could do so fairly and to represent Joey's point of view. Because I'm so much more familiar with the way Anna was doing it.
Right.
So I mean, there are other differences in terms of kind of how the snapshots are handled internally. But the biggest one for me, at least, is whether it includes the user code or not, which has a difference on performance. And it's actually one of the things that we were trying to achieve with the snapshots when having Anna do the work, because it has an impact on things like cold starts for serverless, that kind of thing.
Right. So the snapshot, I mean, it happens just, well, anyway, that could be a whole, yeah, that would be a whole topic. So that's one where I could see, without having to read the whole thing, you can get into like, does it make sense to have just the node code, or does the application code make sense as well? And what are the concerns of one versus the other? Like one, if, you obviously you can't use the snapshot with different applications if you're including the application code, right? Or it won't be optimal for multiple, but that I don't think takes an in-depth knowledge of the implementation. It takes more of a, what are the usage scenarios understanding to figure out which one you'd prefer, people would think would be better.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my only comment, is like, it seems stuck just because it, there's so much detail that it's not something people can easily weigh in on.
Great.
If it could be cut down to, that list of 5 key differences, like in terms of the, it doesn't matter if they're different, if they're equally good. It's more like, what are the points where people think there's a significant reason why you'd want to do something different, right?
So, I know that Joey's been on vacation, and I'm not quite sure when they're expected back. I could ask Anna, and we can send a similar request to Joey just to see if they can each create like a short summary of the difference between the two for us to review.
I mean, and I guess you're suggesting, like, because it sounded like Anna had said, okay, go ahead and land yours, Joey, right?
Out of pure frustration on her part, not because she thinks it's a better technical approach. She just got so frustrated that she had to walk away and go do something else.
Right. Okay. I mean, then I think if we could get the high level, the discussion points, that would probably help the people have a discussion. So I think what you just suggested would make sense to me if Anna and Joey are both willing.
I will. I'll talk to Anna and I'll send that out to Joey and see what we can get.
I mean, and I guess semi-related is just for larger changes, we tried I forget what we called it, but like an proposal enhancement process or whatever at one point. I don't know of any other, like in the discussions, I'm not sure we've come up with anything else that would help in a situation like this, where, you could discuss some of those initial points before you've gone down to the implementation, right?
Yeah, I mean, so when we tried that before, it ended up being a place where ideas went to die because they were just talked to death and before anything was actually done. And now somebody puts a lot of effort into the code. If somebody has a competing point of view, they just go off and write competing code, and then they argue over the discussion or the implementations. So it's
kind of frustrating, though.
It's equally frustrating for different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if there is a great solution to this, other than we need we need some better mechanisms for making sure that things can get viewed and reviewed rather than it just coming down to a fight between two people.
Okay, well, yeah, unless you've got a next specific next step here, and the more general problem, we can discuss else. I guess still, I think there was discussion in some other issues, so we could continue it on there. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next issue, which is the Charter Package Maintenance Working Group. So that's actually been open for 3 weeks. I added a comment basically saying unless anybody objects in the meeting today, we'll consider that approved. There are two TSC approvals and no objections. I looked in our governance and didn't find anything else that said anything specific in terms of chartering a working group. So I think that's okay, but if anybody knows otherwise, let me know. Issue, okay. The next one is Node.js admin audit Google account access. That's still in Brian's hands to do the audit and reach out to myself and Tierney as the chairs. I just really do want to leave that on the agenda because otherwise I'm going to forget. So, and that takes us to the end of the regular tagged issues. Flipping over to what we had in the terms of strategic initiatives. I'm going to start by what's in the issue that was opened. Build resources, not too much to report except that we are setting up a meeting with Linux IT to sort of give them more information. We'd forward them a potential scope of work that we were, asking for help on that we'd worked on before. They asked some questions, so this meeting is the follow-on to that. I see there's no major update on modules. No major update on modules. Let me just see then. I'm going to flip over to the strategic initiative list to see if we have anybody who can talk to any of the others. Quick HTTP 3, anything to add, James?
It's making progress. The experimental implementation's landed in core. It's going through quite a lot of changes. We have code owners enabled for it as an experiment to see if we can, kind of experiment with the landing process, an accelerated landing process. Anna has a PR open to see about if we can eliminate the time frame for the minimal time frame for landing things. The idea
How is that related to Quick? HTTP 3?
It's purely experimental, and all the PRs aren't touching anything else other than Quick. And since we have code owners support, the idea is to basically run it as an experiment to see if we can land effectively with without a time limit and still maintain quality. And also test code owners and stuff like that. So
I see, for Quick and specific, because it's in core, but not really.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But not really. So
it doesn't do anything to release. So yeah.
All right.
So it's a safe sandbox for testing some of these process changes. But yeah, everything's in there. It's just lots of lots and lots of code. It's a really complex bit of code. And so there's lots of work there still to do. So.
Okay. Oh yeah, we already said that. I think that's it then. Okay, so I think that's the agenda. Is there anything else that people want to talk about this week? Okay, if not, we'll call the public part of the meeting to close. People can stick around.